Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal, Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said great. I'm doing great. Today, we are going to pick up where we left off from the last vlog. We were in my hometown of Troy, Ohio, and I was showing you a lot of my memories. And we made it up till about 10, 11 years old or whatever. And today we're gonna pick up from there until I was 18. Days with Jordan the Lion, it begins right now. All right, my friends, welcome to beautiful Troy, Ohio. So now we've made it out to the Newt baseball complex, and we always just called this the complex. It was always in town. Everybody always just said meet out at the complex. This is where you had all of your baseball games when I was a kid, from the time that I started playing when I think I was in first grade until 7th grade. I played games out at all these fields. I'm not going into it because they have a sign that says no trespassing, so they consider, you know, going out there a no-no if you're not supposed to be here. So, but the other thing is, you know, and what's cool is, like, I remember both my grandparents and both my mom, my dad, my sibling, they always were at all of my games and my sister's games. We were very fortunate. Like, they always made time and made our stuff a priority. And even when I got kind of like, even before I was able to get a job at McDonald's, you could get a job umpiring, and they would pay you like $8 to $10 a game, and you really only got booked, or like they only really, because they had so many guys that wanted to do it, you really only got to do like once a week or once every 2 weeks. But seemed like people always called in sick or didn't show up. So it got to a point where they told me, they're like, hey, you know, if you have your parents bring you out here, you know, if somebody doesn't come in, I'll hire you. And I would work almost like every day, almost every night that I came out here, they would find one of the games that I could umpire and make some money. So I had a lot of nights in the summer out here at the complex. Troy Junior Baseball. So here we are at the Troy McDonald's. This is not the same building that I worked in. They tore down the one that I worked in and built this one, but it was on the same property here. When I was 13, that was when you could actually get a legitimate job in this town, and McDonald's was the first place, or the place that would hire the youngest. So when I say legitimate job, I had had other jobs before where you made money, but this was the first place that when I got hired, I had to go to a training course and everything. You had to go to like their corporate office locally 3 different times for training. And it was, you know, they had taxes taken, everything, but I was just dead set, like from the time I was like 11, I wanted a job. I wanted money in my pocket so I could buy stuff. And I had paper routes and I had umpired and stuff, but that was only giving me like, you know, 25, 50 bucks, and I wanted more, so I was ready for a job. And McDonald's, I worked there when I was 13. I hated it. They treated people so poorly here. One thing I did learn here was I never wanted to work here again after I left. So right here we have another big change in my life. When I was 15 years old, I was watching La Bamba, and I decided I wanted to get my first guitar, and I wanted to learn how to play guitar. And so I ended up coming to Sound City Music that was over here in this shopping plaza, and I signed up. I had previously, they opened a different location, a very small one before, and I had taken vocal lessons over the summer just for kind of something to do, something to keep me out of trouble. But, and that was like 2 years before that, so this was really the only music store in town, and they were the only place that offered lessons. So I came here, I bought a white acoustic guitar, and I started taking my first guitar lessons, and this is where I learned how to play guitar. I think the first song that he gave me was Let It Be by the Beatles to learn. Now we're down at the downtown square, the Fountain of Troy, and had quite a bit of history. Some of my favorite moments down here, because my sister got a job as a waitress here at this place. At the time it was called Taggart's, and they ended up needing a busboy, and she got me a job because they figured if, I guess it's like a license to drive, like how different could you and your sister possibly be? So they gave me a job because she was an excellent worker, and the cooks here were like, they were total outlaw characters, and they used to teach me things that eventually, like, just all the stuff that I probably didn't need to know yet. They would teach me all that kind of crazy stuff. Teach me about crazy bands that like my parents would have hated and all that stuff. So I had a lot of memorable moments and went to concerts, went to WCW events with the guys that were cooks here. And one day while we're out in the back alley, there was an alley back here that the main cook at the time, his name was Andrew. Amazing cook, but he liked to drink, and he would always 4 or 5 times a day go out to his car that was parked out back and take a swig off the bottle he had out there. But he always was able to work, no problem or anything. Once or twice a year he'd get hammered on his day off and then not show up the next day or whatever, but he was a good guy. And I remember we were out here one day in this alleyway, and he was smoking a cigarette, and all of a sudden he said, "Hey, do you know that music store that's in town is moving into the plaza here?" And I go, "What?" We were literally right there. And yeah, the place that I had taken guitar lessons at, Sound City Music, had decided to take over. This had always been a drugstore at the time, and they had apparently decided to take over the lease. And as we're talking, we come out here and I see the owner of the music store getting out of his car over here with like paintbrushes and a bucket. So I went over and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "We're gonna move the store into this building and I'm gonna repaint it." And so I offered on my days off to come help him paint, and that's exactly what I did. So this was the main front of the store, but when I started helping him, he was working mainly on the classrooms, the teaching side of it, and that was all back here. So he and I would always enter through this door right here. It's now a business, it's a different business, but we would enter through there, and we painted all that stuff in there. And he said, "Look, Jordan, I can't afford to pay you." And I said, "I didn't do it for payment. I spend a lot of time at your store, and I just thought maybe I could help." And then somebody that worked for him was here one day and came over and he said, "Hey, he really appreciates you helping, even though he can't afford to pay you. So when you want your next guitar, he told me he's gonna sell it to you at cost so that it's as cheap as he can get it." And I go, "Well, really what I wanted was, you know, maybe someday a job or whatever." And the guy goes, "I don't know if he can give you a job, but I know he really appreciates what you're doing." So then one day, probably 6 months later, I get a phone call. Not only had he in fact lived up to his word, and when I found a guitar I wanted, he sold it to me at cost, but that 6 months later, I'm at home taking a nap after school, and I get a call and he says, "Jordan, can you come meet me at the store in an hour?" I said, "Sure." So I came here, took me up to his office, and he said, "Do you want a job selling strings and answering the phones and working the register?" He goes, "You won't be a sales associate out on the floor making commission, but you know, I can give you a job, you know, working the counter, doing all that stuff if you want." So I got it, and that was crazy because they'd never had any teenager work here. It was always like a grown-up job. And that was kind of the job everybody that was in school in our high school that played guitar wanted, was like to work at Sound City. And every one of us had asked, and they had always said no. So I got to work here. It was really awesome, and I enjoyed my time here. So it's crazy. At that time, I worked at both places. I actually worked, what days I wasn't working at Taggart's, I would work here. And basically the internet just killed this store. They ended up having to move to a smaller location. They were a Fender authorized dealer and everything, so they had a big store in here and everything, but they eventually had to move it to a smaller and smaller. I think they went through like 3 locations, and they were just down to teaching, and then it just wasn't worth it to the owner anymore. Too bad to see it go. Now we're actually gonna go right across the square to the buildings that are over here and talk about my history there. So my most vivid memories of movie watching are like real young, when I was with my dad on the weekends. He would always come to the video store that was right here called Home Video Ventures, and you could get 2 movies for $5. So we would always get 1 horror movie and 1 comedy. So I always think of that when I think of like VHS rentals or anything. Now where this where this barbershop is, used to be, it was either this building or this one, I forget which one. It was the tattoo parlor here in town. I think it was this one. And that's where I got my first 3 tattoos. I became friends with the guy, Gene, that owned it. And yeah, he did my tattoos. Now, across the street was the rec center, Troy Rec Center. Now this was important because when you were in junior high, all of the Friday night junior high dances for 7th and 8th graders took place on the second floor here. You paid $5 and they would have a DJ up there and they'd have low lights and you could slow dance with girls and it was fun. And the first floor was like ping pong tables and foosball and just kind of game room stuff and you know, that kind of stuff. But my senior year, we started renting this out on whichever night they weren't using it. It was either Friday or Saturday at that time. My band and my friend Adam's band, they were called High Street Fable. His band eventually became known as Times New Viking and had a pretty good career. We would rent this place out from them for like $100 a night, charge $5 at the door, and we would throw concerts here. So my band was called the Secret Sounds, and our bass player came up with that name because he saw Dave Grohl wearing a shirt that said, "What are those secret sounds?" And he said, "Hey, we should call ourselves Secret Sounds." Now we're going over the bridge to see the rest of my schooling. So here's Troy Junior High School. This is where I went to junior high, of course, both 7th and 8th grade. I was in the plays here both of those years, so that was pretty memorable for me. And I remember that's where I kind of was like, hey, I want to be a performer. But also I started choir here, and the choir teacher here had just an unbelievable work ethic. He was like, from the moment you walked in till the moment you were leaving and the bell rang, he had you working. And I always just thought that was pretty amazing, and remember learning a lot from that guy, and really deciding I was going to take choral or any kind of choral thing that he was teaching, because I knew he was also the choir teacher in high school. I was just going to be in all of his stuff because he was just like somebody you could really learn from. He was good at explaining things. Now I also remember having 8th grade, and it was history was right here, Mr. Van Dyke's class in this bottom window, and I remember 2 vivid things about that. He was a really cool teacher that was a little bit too lax, probably. I remember the big thing was he would loan out people his copy of Feeling Groovy. Before, like, things were so accessible or whatever, he would go like, okay, you gotta bring it back because that's the only copy I have. But I remember, like, he would seat you by your last name alphabetized, and I got sat with like 3 complete troublemakers. And I remember they would sit in the back with a cup in their... They would all wear like starter jackets and stuff. That was a big thing then, like wearing like winter coats all year long. And in their jackets, they would have like a little plastic cup, and they would be dipping in the class, spit and dip in there. And like he never said anything about it. Nobody ever really seemed to care. Back then, people just didn't, I mean, I guess they caught you smoking. They made a big deal about that, but people would like literally dip and spit on the floor. I remember those guys, those same kids would spit right on the carpet in some of the classes and got in trouble for it, but they didn't get in trouble for like underage nicotine or anything like that. They got in trouble for like defacing the property. So this was a weird 2 years. I didn't really, I mean, other than those things, I didn't really get much out of my time here. And then right here was the entrance to the high school when I went here. I think they use the front now mainly, but this was where I would always enter off the bus. And again, I love the choir program. That was my favorite thing here, but I was also, I told you guys I got into guitar, so I was the guy that 2-3 days a week I brought my guitar with me, and then after lunch I would sit in a hallway somewhere and practice. Or choir teacher, since he was the one that we had choir and then he released us for lunch, sometimes he would leave his room open and I could come back and play my guitar there. But even then I was like, man, I can't wait to get out of here and go do something with my life. Had some really cool teachers here though. I learned a lot from Mr. McDougall, Mr. Davis, Mr. Barrett. I love those people. They were great teachers. Really kind of prepared you more for life than just the classroom. So it was a good time. I didn't really like high school, but I was lucky I had teachers that I did like. It says this is only staff parking, but when I was here, it was student parking back here. You've seen this one before if you watched the vlog I made from Troy about Elvis Presley performing here in town in 1956. This is where I graduated. They had our ceremony inside Hobart Arena on the floor in there, of course. And I remember us being out in that parking lot for rehearsals and everything, and they were teaching us how to all file in and all that stuff. And I remember being so relieved. Nothing against this town, but it was just a one-horse town for me. It was a little too small for my liking, and I couldn't wait to get out and go see what I was gonna do with my life. So when I knew graduation day was coming, to me it was like, it's like prison release. I was just like, let's do this so I can go off and make something happen, you know? So this was a pretty happy time for me, happy day. 1999. I think I graduated like June, I want to say like June 1st or something like that. Early part of June or late part of May of 1999. Okay, so my senior year I got myself into trouble at this place. This was the Staunton Grange. Now, they were pretty cool about letting my band rent this out and play concerts here. We would always book concerts. We like book this place out on a Friday night when there wasn't a football game. And we charge $5 at the door, and we usually do pretty well for ourselves. Have like 2 of our friends' bands play, so we'd have 3 bands on the bill. And the last time that we played here, I would always just call the people, the lady or the guy who booked the place out. They would say, yeah, that date's available, and then she would usually meet me here the day that we were gonna have it, unlock it for me and everything. I'd give her the money, and then I think they would charge us like $100 or $125 to rent it out. I'd give her the money, and then she would come back at the end of the night and lock it up. And so I called to book it. She said, yeah, it's available that day and everything. And I said, I want it. And for some reason, you know, I assumed that we had it booked because I didn't hear otherwise. And we showed up and played a show here one night, and we're just finishing up we were the headliners, so we were doing the last set of the night. We're finishing up our last song, and all of a sudden her and her husband and her son are in there glaring at us right in the front. And we finished up, and she goes, how did you get in here? I didn't authorize you to play here. And I said, I called and asked you about the date and everything, and you said it was available. She goes, but I didn't say you could have it. How did you get in here? I said, I showed up and the door was unlocked. And so, I mean, so they couldn't really flip out on us too much, because whenever I just assumed she had already been here and unlocked it for us. And so we had our show, gave her the money, and she said, you can never play here again. But we had just graduated, so we weren't going to play any shows over the summer. We couldn't promote them anyway. And then the band broke up, so this was our very last show as the Secret Sounds was here at the Staunton Grange. Now we've come out to Upper Valley Medical Center. That's what it was when I worked here. So this was a massive campus, and I worked here when I was a senior in high school. Okay, so I want you to see this sign that has all the different locations. They have all these different outbuildings here. They had the DeVita Dialysis Center, buildings ABC, the Kester Pavilion. That was all part of my job I'm going to explain to you. I always used to park out here in this parking lot, and there are some doors that you'll see right over there. That was my entrance, and that was the cafeteria. My job was called Dietary Services, and what we were hired to do was we helped plate up all of the trays for everyone in the entire hospital as well as the outbuildings. So my job was one of the drivers. So they actually had these big moving type trucks, like kind of like if you rented a U-Haul with a lift on it. That's what they had to drive, and I was one of the drivers, and they would load up a big enclosed cart full of meals for the outbuildings, and I would roll them out to the loading dock, load up my truck, secure them with bungee cables, and then I would drive all over this campus delivering. And when you went to the adult mental health facility, they always had a sign that said, watch for flight risks. So when you went in, you had to make sure that nobody was like waiting around a corner to like run out, because we had secured badges we had to scan to get in and out and everything. So to me, it was such an odd job for like a high schooler to have. That doesn't strike me as something you would want to entrust a 16 or 17-year-old with, but that was my job. And one of the reasons I like this job is because at the time, minimum wage was like $5.25, and they paid $8.25 here. And then you got paid more if you worked weekend shifts, and you got paid more if you worked on holidays, and you were always guaranteed one weekend off a month. So all that combined, I was like, this was a great place to work, and I really enjoyed it. I worked here until I moved to California. And there were instances where when you were trying to bring the carts out onto the lift to lower them down, where they did roll off and all the meals got destroyed and they had to remake all the meals and everything. I was just like all part of it, but yeah, I had to drive around to all these outbuildings, and we would drive around, deliver all the meals, and then all the people that were plating up stuff, they would go and they would wash the dishes. Once everybody was done eating, they would go collect the carts and wash the dishes. And the drivers, which is what I had to do, we would then drive back to all the places we had delivered them to, pick up those carts, bring them back, and the dishwashers would wash the trays and the carts and everything. So I would have delivered to that building. I worked here for about 1.5 years. My entire senior year, and then until about March of the following year when I moved to LA. All right, my friends, we're gonna call it a day. I wanna thank Alan Amick for becoming my newest Patreon. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing quite a bit of my history. If you're new here, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and please ring the bell for notifications. We'll see you all next time. Have a great night, and goodbye.